It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC, live from the Green Space today. And as usual, when we're in the Green Space, you can watch the Brian Lehrer Show as well as listen to it. So if you want to watch the live video stream that our Green Space technology allows us to put out, you can go to thegreenspace.org. Remember, green has an E at the end of it, that word, so thegreenspace.org. Or you can go to the WNYC Facebook page and find the live stream there. Now, the art world began its reckoning of centuries of gender imbalance with this rallying cry: abuse of power comes as no surprise. That phrase is borrowed from conceptual artist Jenny Holzer's truisms, and in October of last year, right on the heels of the Me Too movement's beginning, over 2,000 women and gender nonconforming artists, writers, curators, and gallerists signed an open letter, not surprised, calling out the power structures that allow sexual misconduct in the art world. Now, it's not surprising that powerful men would abuse their power in art as in any other field, but here's the hard part the art world is grappling with, maybe uniquely: what to do with works of art that represent problematic imagery or are created by problematic artists who have abused their positions or abused women in their personal lives. Joining me now to discuss the Me Too movement and how women's stories are impacting the art world is Priscilla Frank, arts and culture reporter for the Huffington Post. She broke the recent story about the artist Chuck Close. Priscilla, thanks so much for coming to the Green Space. Welcome to WNYC.
Thank you for having me.
And let's begin with, I guess, the initial question suggested by, the No Surprise as the title of the movement. Does anything about the art world in particular make it any more or less surprising that powerful men would abuse their power?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why the art world is unique. One is that so many of the interactions take place not in traditional office settings, but behind closed doors, whether it's an artist and his subject in a studio, or a collector and an artist, or a lot of socializing takes place, a lot of networking. Additionally, the nude female body is one of the oldest subjects in art, and one of the first things that you learn in art school is how to draw a figure. Often that is a naked woman. So there's this sense that since the dawn of art history, women's bodies have been objectified and are seen. There's just a time-honored tradition of seeing men as the geniuses and the creators and the subjects, and women as the objects. And
you broke the story about sexual misconduct allegations against the artist Chuck Close. Some New Yorkers not familiar with Close may not know his 12 mosaics recently installed at the 86th Street station on the new 2nd Avenue subway line. Close also painted Bill Clinton's presidential portrait by way of historical reference. Why don't you take us through the allegations in your story?
Yeah, so basically I spoke to one woman and she told me her story, and then eventually it came out that this seemed to be a pattern that other women had experienced. She met Chuck Close at an art event. He came up to her, offered to make a portrait of her. And she was an aspiring artist, and he's obviously one of the most influential and powerful portrait artists alive today. It was a huge honor. Many of his most well-known portraits are paintings that are sort of pixelated and hyper-realistic, zoomed in on people's faces. So she assumed, like many of these other women, this was the kind of portrait that he would be doing. Often he paints artists that he admires, so she was very flattered and excited. They emailed, she went to his studio. Once she got there, he told her to get naked, and it was going to be a nude portrait, and in fact that this was more of an audition to even see if she would end up being chosen for a portrait. Oftentimes these women were uncomfortable, didn't expect to get naked, and some left, some ended up being coerced into taking off their clothes. He then acted inappropriately. One woman, he made lewd comments about her vagina. One woman, he asked to touch her vagina. one woman, he asked if she would masturbate for him. So a lot of these women left feeling deceived and humiliated, and like he had used his position of power as an artist to take advantage of them.
So before we even get to the question of what to do with his art, where it's currently displayed, I mean, these allegations that you just described highlight the lack of protections for models, especially since you said, as you said before, a lot of these interactions take place behind closed doors, obviously. Is there any kind of industry protocol as to how art models should expect to be treated and how they should expect to be able to protect themselves?
Yes, there are modeling unions that I think work more in the fashion industry, and in the art world, a lot of people who are professional sitters for life drawing classes. One woman who I spoke with was, so she told me how different this felt from the protocol that she was normally forced to follow, where one thing she mentioned was she always went to the bathroom to change and then came back in a robe, so you didn't have to just deal with that vulnerability of getting naked in front of somebody. Also, you would never be asked to pose nude on the spot. You would always know about that beforehand. But in the case of Close, a lot of people that he was asking were artists or just women that he met at parties, so they were not professional models.
We can talk about artists who've exhibited problematic behavior. We can also talk about works of art in which the subject is problematic. On November 30th of last year, New Yorkers Mia Merrill and Anna Zuccaro put together a petition on Care 2 demanding that the Met either remove or amend the wall text to a painting by French artist Balthus titled Thérèse Dreaming. Can you briefly describe that painting for our audience?
Yeah, so it is a sort of surrealist painting of a girl, Thérèse, which is based off of Balthus, the artist's neighbor, who was 12 years old at the time. She's leaning back in a chair, her legs are spread, her eyes are closed, her underwear is showing. It's definitely unsettling, erotic, and it's a challenging image of a 12-year-old girl.
And joining us now is Anna Zuccaro, one of the co-authors of the petition. Anna, thank you for giving us some time on the phone. Welcome to WNYC.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me.
So tell us why you found the painting to be problematic, or I guess we just heard a suggestion of it from Priscilla, but you can go more into it if you want, and what inspired you to call on the Met to actually remove it?
Right. That's a great question. So my sister and I found the Balthus painting problematic because of its obviously undeniably erotic portrayal of a 12-year-old girl, but also because the Met really provides zero context when it comes to the history of Balthus and his history of sexual abuse. So upon further research, we found out that Balthus was not a newcomer to controversy or criticism when it came to his relationship with young girls. And throughout the entirety of his career, his paintings and a lot of these perverse relationships caused stirs throughout the art world. So given all of that, what inspired us to act was the attention surrounding a lot of the Me Too movement, and we felt empowered to start the petition asking the Met to reconsider the way it presents Thérèse Dreaming after realizing the concept of sexual abuse was not exempt from fine art.
So a spokesman for the Met responded to your petition by writing this, quote, "Moments such as this provide an opportunity for conversation, and visual art is one of the most significant means we have for reflecting on both the past and the present and encouraging the continuing evolution of existing culture through informed discussion and respect for creative expression," unquote. And I should say the Met has not taken any action to remove the piece or amend the wall text. I'm guessing you're not satisfied with the museum's response, but how would you respond to the words in that paragraph?
Well, first, just to be clear, Mia and I didn't really want, nor did we expect the Met to actually remove the painting. We use the word remove in the title of the petition more as a tactic to raise attention surrounding the issue that Balthus was a sexual abuser, which is reflected in much of his work, including Thérèse Dreaming, of course. But in regard to the Met's official response, me and I actually agree that moments like these really do provide opportunities to discuss larger issues. And in this case, this is education and the implications of art on society. But yeah, we were definitely less than satisfied by the Met's refusal to amend the wall text. We really do love the Met as an institution and understand that change at a place like the Met takes time. But we felt their response skirted the main issue a bit and used some basic talking points in general language to do so.
It was very general language. Let me try to put some of it into what seems to me the plain English that they were trying to get at here, when they write, moments such as this provide an opportunity for conversation, and visual art is one of the most significant means we have for reflecting on both the past and the present, and encouraging the continuing evolution of existing culture through informed discussion. I guess it means now we can have this conversation that looks back and says, God, that was really inappropriate, and that there's usefulness just in doing that expressively, without taking the work of art down. So is your bigger issue that you would have liked some text drawing attention to the issues that you raised?
Absolutely, and I think and Priscilla made a really good point in her article. That mentions the petition. She says that people that like Shelley Ball, who's an artist and curator and educator, really are concerned more with addressing the way that art is discussed and taught, as opposed to the way it's just displayed. So I think that ties into a lot of what the Met was trying to say in their initial response.
Priscilla, you want to get in on this? What are you thinking as you listen to Anna and she just referenced your article?
Yeah, so I saw the petition, and afterwards I reached out to some museum educators to hear their thoughts. I think a lot of people did react immediately and viscerally to the idea of removing the painting, and there was a lot of backlash against the petition, and really the idea of amending the wall text and creating some context got overlooked. So I spoke to museum educators who saw this as an opportunity for change. Art like this is weird because it was made so long ago, and yet we experience it and live it in the present. So it is this opportunity to see how we've evolved and how people saw teenage girls at that time. So I spoke with one museum educator who was talking about a student-curated show at her institution, the Clark Museum, that was called Romance and Rape Culture, where they highlighted works from their permanent collection that had perhaps troubling gender dynamics, or she mentioned one sculpture of Bacchus and Ariadne, where Bacchus is waking up Ariadne by kissing her while she's sleeping. And in curating the show, these students were just asking questions like, is it okay to kiss a woman who's sleeping without her consent? And using
Al Franken only does that for comic effect. I would just throw that.
Using these images as the living organisms that they are, and using them to have conversations. And I do think that art is a huge part, obviously, of a museum experience, but so are the didactic materials that surround it. And I do think it would be exciting for museums to see this as an opportunity to activate the problematic pieces in their collection.
So, Anna, let me get your reaction before you go, and then we're going to open this up for audience members here in the green space and listeners who want to call in to sort of the more global question that this raises. Jerry Saltz, the New York Magazine art critic, after seeing your petition, wrote this on Instagram. If you take Terrace Dreaming out, you pretty much have to remove all art from Wings of India, Africa, Asia, Oceania, Greece, Rome, Renaissance, Rococo, and Impressionism, German Expressionism, Klimt, Munch, and all Picasso and Matisse. Hashtag Art World Taliban. Whoa. So we have at least one person applauding here in the green space. And we'll see how many other people want to applaud when given the opportunity in a minute. But obviously, it goes way beyond this one Baltos piece. So, what would you say about the general project, if there should be a general project, of going through all of art from all of art history that's displayed publicly and deciding what's acceptable by today's standards?
Right. Well, firstly, the fact that Jerry Saltz felt compelled to comment on my sister and my petition was really cool. So we kind of nerded out for a second about that. And I think that he brings up an interesting idea, though it is a bit tongue-in-cheek, that, recontextualizing art that portrays sexual abuse, however it is displayed, is actually a pretty novel and interesting concept. I don't know how long something like that would take, but I think it could be worth undertaking. I think it could be worth looking into art history and looking into how we educate others and trying to describe or at least encapsulate what's going on in some of these images.
Ana Zuccaro, co-author of that recent petition on Care 2, demanding that the Met either remove or amend the wall text to that painting by the French artist Balthus titled "To Race Dreaming." Thanks so much for coming on and explaining where you're at.
Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate it.
Now we're going to take a break here in the Green Space. Then we're going to come back and have a little bit of that more global conversation. So people here in the Green Space, get ready to speak up or ask a question. And listeners, we can take a few phone calls on this at 212-433-WNYC, 433-9692, whether it's exploitation of a 12-year-old from how many years ago or whatever else it is, or the behavior of the artist. Will bring up the case that always gets referenced of, well, what do you do about Picasso? 212-433-9692 as we continue with Priscilla Frank from Huffington Post, who wrote about this issue. Stay with us.
Growing up in rural Idaho, Tara Westover didn't go to school, had no birth certificate, and never saw a doctor, while her family stowed food and weapons for a confrontation with the government. On the next Fresh Air, she talks about growing up, getting a PhD, and coming to terms with her background. Tara Westover's memoir is Educated. Join us.
Today at 2 on 93.9 FM WNYC.
WNYC is supported by Flatiron Books, publishers of Force of Nature. In Jane Harper's new novel, 5 women go out into the woods for a hike, but only 4 return. Force of Nature, available now. Montclair Film, presenting 70s Mixtape, a dance party with performances by Stephen Colbert, John Batiste, Patrick Wilson, Warren Zanes, and Joe McGinty in the Losers Lounge. Saturday, February 24th at 8 p.m., montclairfilm.org.
Who's behind that Twitter account? A person or a bot?
There's kind of the Bernie bots or the resist bots, and on the other side there's kind of the alt-right, far-right group.
The war of the social media bots and what it's doing to American politics. It's next time on The Takeaway, weekday afternoons at 3 on 93.9 FM.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC, live in the Green Space today. And when you're live in the Green Space, when we're live in the Green Space, you can watch us on live streaming video if you choose at thegreenspace.org, green with an E at the end of it, thegreenspace.org, or on our Facebook page, the WNYC Facebook page. You can watch the show as well as listen to it today. My current guest is Priscilla Frank, arts and culture reporter for the Huffington Post. She broke the recent story about the artist Chuck Close and the allegations of sexual misconduct pertaining to him and particularly some of his models. So audience members in the Green Space, listeners out there in Radio Land, how many of you, we heard the one audience member applauding spontaneously, how many of you would give, let's say, a full 3 cheers, applaud if you would, to what New York Magazine art critic Jerry Saltz wrote on Instagram about that particular petition regarding the Balthus at the Met? If you take today's streaming out, you pretty much have to remove all art from wings of India, Africa, Asia, Oceania, Greece, Rome, Renaissance, Rococo, and Impressionism, German Expressionism, Klimt, Munch, and all Picasso and Matisse. Hashtag Art World Taliban. 3 cheers, applause if you're a 3 cheers person. How about if you're a 2 cheers person? Like you think he raises a really important issue here, but you don't want to dismiss the movement in the way he did. And 0 to 1 cheers, like, oh, please, come on, stop being so retrograde. We have to look these things in the eye. Okay. All right, so we have found the issue that divides the Brian Lehrer Show Green Space audience. And I understand that the gentleman who originally applauded, here in the audience will follow up with a comment. Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you. I just feel like the Me Too movement has created a bit of a reign of terror in this country, to the point that I find myself rolling my eyes and not listening to what may very well be legitimate concerns. And now I'm hearing that we want to empty our museums for the same purpose. And what I feel is happening, and I consider myself to be a very progressive male, but what is happening is that this is all sort of just going into the ether, and legitimate concerns aren't being heard because, again, I feel it's a reign of terror, and all of a sudden it's affected the art world. It certainly has already affected, film and television. Now it's affecting our museums, and I'm not saying that it's not without merits on some level, but I feel like we need to look at this on without being so reactionary to every single thing and to dismiss everything.
Reign of terror makes it sound unfounded. So when you hear about...
Well, I would argue, Brian, that during the French Revolution, there were people who very well felt they had grounded ideals, right? But there was a reign of terror that was trying to eliminate anything that people felt disagreeable with.
So would you point to any particular example of injustice as opposed to just a feeling that you have about it?
I feel like what we're hearing, and it's happened at this radio station as well, people are disappearing, right, because of allegations. But I'm not hearing the reasons why, right? All we hear is, oh no, they're gone, right? There was an investigation and they're gone. But I don't know why they're gone, right? People are disappearing. People are leaving. And if someone has a legitimate concern, then they should be bringing that to the fore. And I do take a little bit of exception with, well, people are afraid because there are people who are so powerful. Like, I'm sorry, I think some people are hiding behind that. I think there's some truth to it, but I think a lot of people are hiding behind that. And I think you have to take a position, and you have to stand up, and you have to accuse people and deal with the consequences of that.
Right. And I certainly, because you referenced our own case, I feel like I should say that I've also spoken about how I wish that we could be told more. There have been any number of cases in the Me Too movement era where confidentiality and transparency seem to come into conflict with each other. I would really like to see some way for people's confidentiality to be protected while still, when we're talking about public figures, if there's anything there that has really warranted the actions, for them to be made as public as possibly could be. But who wants to respond to that gentleman with maybe a different point of view? And anybody? So, okay, we have somebody over there. Hi.
I'm going to stand for this one. Brian, you gave a lot of platform to this gentleman over here.
Your turn.
As someone who has experienced assault and harassment my entire life, as someone who knows hundreds and thousands of women who have, this is really not the time for you to be defensive or to get the kind of platform you just got. Priscilla, I want to thank you. You actually did a wonderful story on my colleague Jayshree Abichandani's protest outside the Met Brewer. Jayshree is a South Asian artist who alleges that she was raped when she was an assistant to a very well-known photographer, Raghuveer Singh, overseas. The reason I want to bring it up, I had no idea you were going to be on today, is because women of color are often sidelined in this conversation, and I'm really grateful that you gave Jayshree's protest a voice. You can Google Jayshree Abichandani. One thing I am curious about is why aren't we giving more attention to the fact that women artists struggle so much to have their work shown at museums and organizations like the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So I'm not so much interested in getting rid of the Picasso art of the world as it is making space for women who are just as talented as those Picassos of the world to have their art shown. It is absolutely brutal that we're not making space for these women. right? And that's true in every single industry out there. And I'm so glad you're highlighting the artistic world. It's something very few of us know about. I stopped watching Woody Allen movies about 3 or 4 years ago after I saw Dylan's piece in the New York Times. She's such a credible woman. That's why I believed her. When I saw Woody's reaction to that piece, I didn't like how he treated his daughter. That's why I believe Dylan Farrow. My life has not significantly changed by not watching Woody Allen movies, which I grew up with since the time I was 5 years old. I am still a happy moviegoer. My life has not been ruined by boycotting Woody Allen's movies. I think the same can be said for any artist out there. Thank you.
Do you want to go any further with respect to the art that is in museums that's either objectionable in, what it depicts or the way it was made or the other behavior of the artist, in addition to making more room for women artists?
I think the petition is a brilliant idea. I would love to see context for, I'm not a dumb museum goer. I would like to know where these pieces came from. I think any 12-year-old child who is exposed like that, I have an immediate reaction. I not only, I would like to know the context, and then I would like that painting taken down. But that's because I don't think that child sexual abuse is something that we should be supporting in the United States of America.
Thank you very much. Priscilla, what are you thinking?
Whew. Well, first of all...
You don't have to be the final arbiter of all of these points of view.
I wanted to stress that I am not arguing that we clear out museums, and I don't really think that anybody is. I do think the things that I've heard loudly are, number one, more context, so these images aren't presented in a vacuum where they can be disturbing/influencing viewers, and also to diversify collections. Art history is a history of power, and the voices that we've heard have overwhelmingly been not only white and male, but misogynist. And I think that this isn't only the job of artists, but of teachers and curators and institutions to decide what kind of stories they want to tell. And it's fine to show this perspective because it's a very real and prominent perspective, but I think we should then really be trying to provide more visions of womanhood and sexuality and personhood.
And I want to just bring one other thing into it before we run out of time. You spent a lot of time talking to educators about what to do with works of art that not only the things we've been talking about how the subjects of the art are treated or depicted, but also that feature content that's no longer, that's kind of racist, frankly. Artists from the 19th century like Jean-Léon Gérôme and Eugène Delacroix, their work today could be described as Orientalist, meaning their paintings portrayed Eastern cultures as inferior and strange. And I wonder how you think that topic intersects with the Me Too discussion about the treatment of women.
Yes, someone brought this up to me when I was doing these interviews and said that she saw how we see Orientalism as a movement today was a potential thing to look forward to, a goal for the Me Too movement. Now, when we look at how these Western painters painted people from the East as exotic and other, we don't see that as a truthful depiction. We see that as a representation of how Westerners imagined the other and imagined Easterners. And so I think that there's room for us to see these many depictions of passive, sexual, beautiful women and not think, oh, this is what women's sexuality is, but oh, this is how men imagined women's sexuality for so long.
We are going to have to leave it here because we are out of time for this segment. Obviously, this is a conversation that's going on in the art world, in the media world, in many other worlds. And we thank Priscilla Frank, arts and culture reporter for the Huffington Post, who broke the recent story about artist Chuck Close. First, for your reporting, and second, for coming here to the Green Space and talking about it with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.